Remember how President Trump always claimed that Americans didn't need anything from anyone, not from Canada, not from China, not from the EU? That was his line back in early 2025. But now the story has changed. Just this past Friday, he signed a brand new executive order that openly admits the U.S. depends on materials from abroad, the very opposite of what he once promised. Starting Monday, Trump is actually cutting tariffs for certain imports. Why the sudden change? And what does it tell us about America's position in the global economy? Let's break it down. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Friday that will provide tariff exemptions beginning Monday on certain goods, including nickel, gold, other metals, as well as chemical and pharmaceutical products. During his first 7 months in office, Trump has pushed through steep tariff hikes in an effort to reshape the global trade system, reduce U.S. trade deficits, and secure concessions from foreign partners in negotiations. In what seems to be a clear act of pushback, Donald Trump is now taking a position that contradicts his earlier remarks. According to the new order, the tariff cuts will apply to items that cannot be grown, mined, or naturally produced in the United States, or are not available in sufficient quantities to meet domestic needs. Well, the reality is that the United States is still heavily dependent on foreign sources for a number of critical raw materials, the very materials that keep technology, clean energy, and defense industries running. And the data shows just how deep this reliance goes. Before examining which countries supply these materials to the U.S., the extent of that reliance, and whether they can be produced domestically, let's first look at the rest of the executive order's details. His latest order opens new tab lists more than 45 categories of goods that will qualify for zero import tariffs from aligned partners, who finalize framework agreements to reduce Trump's reciprocal tariffs and other levies enacted under the Section 232 National Security Statute. According to the order, exemptions for countries with U.S. trade agreements will begin at 12 on Monday. Trump stated in the order that his readiness to cut tariffs will hinge on the scope and economic value of a trading partner's commitments to the United States in its agreement on reciprocal trade, as well as on overall U.S. national interests. A White House official noted that the order also adds carve-outs for certain agricultural goods, aircraft and aircraft parts, and non-patented pharmaceutical inputs. Now let's take a closer look at which countries supply these materials to the U.S., how heavily the nation relies on them, and whether they could be produced domestically. Take graphite, for instance, essential for electric vehicle batteries and fuel cells. The United States has no natural production at all. In 2024, apparent consumption was about 52,000 tons, entirely met through imports. Nearly half of that, 43%, came from China. Canada and Mexico each supplied 13%, and Mozambique another 13%. On top of that, China dominates the processing side, controlling more than 90% of global capacity for battery-grade spherical graphite. About 19% of those exports ended up in the United States last year. So, while Trump says America doesn't need China, nearly half of U.S. graphite still comes from there. That's like saying you don't need coffee while drinking 2 cups every morning. Nickel shows the same pattern. Indonesia produced nearly 60% of the world's mine output in 2024, but the United States relied on imports, about 100,000 tons of primary nickel. Almost half came from Canada, with Norway, Australia, and Brazil making up much of the rest. Recycling does help. About 54% of U.S. nickel use came from scrap. But even there, Canada, Mexico, and the United Kingdom were the main suppliers. Without recycling, U.S. reliance on imports would be almost total. The only domestic mine in Michigan produced just 8,000 tons in 2024, and all of it had to be shipped overseas for processing. Gold is mined domestically but not in sufficient volumes. In 2024, the United States produced about 160 tons and imported another 150. Switzerland led those imports at 24%, followed by Canada at 19%, Mexico at 15%, and Colombia at 9%. For ores and concentrates, Canada supplied nearly all of it, while doré imports were dominated by Mexico and Colombia. And aluminum is no exception. The United States consumed around 1.8 million tons of bauxite in 2024, but imported 2.8 million tons to meet both direct demand and refining needs. Two-thirds of that came from Jamaica, with Turkey, Guyana, and Australia making up most of the rest. For alumina itself, imports totaled 1.3 million tons, and Brazil was the overwhelming supplier at 68%. The irony is that the countries dominating these supply chains, Canada, China, Brazil, and Switzerland, are the same ones targeted by sweeping tariffs under the Trump administration's 2025 trade measures. This shows how vulnerable U.S. industry is to geopolitical tension. It also underscores the country's reliance on imported materials it cannot yet produce at home. The order further covers compounds used in generic pharmaceuticals, including the anesthetic lidocaine and reagents used for diagnostic testing. Additionally, the order authorizes tariff removal for natural graphite, neodymium magnets, and LEDs, while also ending prior exemptions on certain plastics and polysilicon, a material critical for solar panel manufacturing. So when you put all of this together, the big picture becomes clear. In his second term, President Trump is pushing a new strategy, rewarding partners who cut tariffs while still trying to pressure rivals. But the irony is hard to miss. The countries America needs the most, China, Canada, Brazil, and Switzerland, are the same ones Trump has repeatedly targeted with tariffs. The executive order may look like a bold move, but it also reveals how vulnerable the U.S. remains to resources it cannot produce on its own. That's it for today's analysis. Thanks so much for watching. This channel is independent. We don't have corporate backing. Your support is what keeps us going. If you found this breakdown valuable, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. It really helps more people discover our work. And don't stop here. On your screen right now is the next video we handpicked for you. It dives even deeper into news which matter. Click it and we'll see you there.